Hey there, Goa fans. This is Mark, DJ Solitaire, here with episode 102 of Retro Goa Explorations, my weekly series in which I share in every episode one of my favorite tracks from the 1990s Goa Trance psychedelic dance movement. Okay, so as of last week, episode 101, we've started moving into tracks that I first heard or that were released in the 97-98 season. So roughly September 97 through to August 98. Really pivotal time as I was wrapping up my last 4 or 5 months in the UK. Before coming to Canada for a few weeks and then moving to Japan. And so this track is one that I heard well before its release. Lots of stories about this one. Very strong emotional connection to this absolutely incredible track, and a couple of interesting details to share about it today. So, as I have been sharing quite, amongst my stories, I lived in the Tufnell Park area of London, not far, about 5 minutes walk away from Richard DJ Purple, I should say, from the Dragonfly label, who was also living with Sam Astronomics, great producer. And a few blocks away from there was the French Dat Mafia household. And so I used to regularly hear tunes at Richard's place. And one day he puts on this absolute belter that was an unpublished track by Simon Posford and Youth. And I was just like, what is this masterpiece? He got it on a DAT from Dragonfly, which is how things happen. And Richard told me he was round Youth's place um, one day, and he gave that to him and a couple of other ones. And obviously, I mean, what a treasure. Now, this was, a DJ, every DJ back then really had their style. And so had their own approach to how it is that they put stories together. But it was also your DAT collection. That was also really something that held you apart. So everybody, I was talking in episode 101, right, about how hard I worked to get that Delta track. And so that was a signature track because it was quite exclusive. And so that was a big part of the story back then. But of course, it's not just having the tracks. You have to know what to do with it. But having the tracks is key, right? Ollie told me many years later that he said, 95% of DJing is track selection, right? Right track, right time. But of course, you need the skill to know how to put the right track at the right time, but you also need the right tracks. And this is one of the right tracks. And Richard, quite understandably, did not immediately give it to me because this was something exclusive. This was something, really, really key. But of course, I always wanted to give that a listen because huge Simon Posford fan, which is no surprise. And as I've talked about a lot. And so when we went to Japan that November, right, November 97, I had played at my party, he played at his party. I'm pretty sure he must have dropped this at that party. But later on in the day, we were walking through the Harajuku district and somebody took us to some after party that was happening during the day. And the guy found out who Richard was. He's like, "Oh, would you play something? Would you play something?" And pretty sure we must have still had, walking around with our DJ utility kit with a portable DAT player and so on. And Richard only got to play two tracks. I think they needed to wrap up or something like that. And the first one he put on was this one. And the main DJ was just completely beside himself. I mean, you could see the circuitry blowing. So so that track then, before I left the UK, would come out on Dragonfly Classics, which included a bunch of classic Dragonfly tracks that had been released and then a bunch that had not. There were some other ones that they could have put on there that weren't, but there's always something else that can be done. A beautifully conceived release by Darren, who was managing Dragonfly at the time. But I remember, getting this track was a priority for me. And of course, as I said, Richard had it for a while, and then I eventually got it. And boy, did I play it a lot, and I still do. I played it at that Vancouver art gallery party that I mentioned in the previous episode. That was the second track I played, and I mean, you can really see the crowd going quite wild to it. But back to this track, there's an extra little detail that I found out relatively recently. Back in, I think it was 2022, when I was at ZNA, I was hanging out with Gus Till, the brilliant musician who was part of the later iteration of Slinky Wizard, and of course all these other fantastic projects, major creative artist. And he says to me, "Hey, have you ever heard this? Like, there was this really cool track that I worked on with Youth and Simon. It's got these Tibetan chants and chimes and bells and stuff." And I was like, "You worked on that?" He's like, "Well, do you know the track I'm talking about?" It's like, "Yeah, it was released." He's like, "What? Nobody told me about that." And I was like, "And you weren't credited on it." Because when you look at it, it just says Simon and Youth. He was a little taken aback and surprised, but this happened a lot. So he was working at Dragonfly Studios for a few months, and he was doing engineering work, but he came up apparently with the idea he brought in the actual samples of the Tibetan chants and chimes that we're going to be hearing, that characterize the opening particularly and the closing of this track. So he was a little bit surprised. So I just touched in with him again recently just to check on the timeline, because I was really curious when this was produced. And he said in the first few months of 1997. So he was there from January through March before doing some more traveling and then coming back to the UK. So that's when this was done, and then it was released about a year later. Dragonfly Classics came out, according to Discogs, in January 98. So that's that. So as to the other musicians, of course, Youth is the founder of Dragonfly Records and running, Butterfly Studios, and a major music producer of, mainstream music. He's a Grammy winner for The Verve, right? But this music is where his heart is. And Simon, of course, Simon Posford, was hallucinogen, but working also, like us, previously as an engineer at Butterfly Studios. And so getting Simon and Youth together in this dance music was pretty interesting. They did Celtic Cross. They were part of that sort of more acoustic flavor of music together, which is also brilliant. Now, I saw them do a kind of Celtic Cross live at an ambient party. It was ostensibly just an ambient festival outdoors. There was not too many people. I think more people on the guest list than buying tickets. But anyway, it was an incredible festival, amazing lineup. And so they did this acoustic outdoor sort of afternoon version. And the main system had to be shut off at night. But at night on the Saturday, there was this rip-roaring dance party going on. So much for ambient, right? In this shed. It was on a farm. And it was Simon and Youth DJing together. And I mean, it was a wild one. And it was just pretty much, Youth going through the dats and handing the dat to Simon, and Simon putting it on. And it was, all the belters. It was just one thing after another, and it was amazing. So I didn't know this track at that point, so I don't know if it was played. I recognized, a lot of the stuff that was being played. It was all the killers. And so then, yeah, having them in the studio producing this kind of dance music, whole other story. Really incredible. It's a short-ish track, but wow, it's full. And there's a lot of the hallmarks of, I think, really the best of Goa that we have here. So I think that's enough prattling on for now. How about we start listening to the track, which makes quite an entrance. right at the beginning. So the name of the project is Utopia, and the name of the track is Mandala. I would always get confused about which one is which. You know, I'm like looking at this here is like, is Utopia the project or Mandala is the project or whatever the case may be. So Mandala is the project, Utopia is the track. And it's a very kind of, I mean, boy, if we lived in a world with more music like this, it would be Utopia. So here we go. Let's give this a listen. All right, so there's those Tibetan drum chants. I'm assuming Tibetan. It's my memory of it. Forgive me if I'm wrong, culturally appropriating. And then very cool chant. Have more of the bells coming in. Key change there. And now we start getting things a bit more synthesized. The energy. This is one of the most infectiously enthusiastic tracks. Drum build up and then that bouncing bass line. Drum build up as well. Clarity, the transparency of the textures. The upper level, right? That whole frequency range opens up. And just the way that mirrors the harmonies of the bass line. And then wonderful figurations. I mean, they get all of these sounds, I mean, just not terrestrial at all, right? Given what we started with, and then the build up, and then the intervals here are gorgeous. Then that drive. So what's amazing, I mean, it's really detached, right? And then you have the different layering that's going on and stuff that's got pitch but no notes, and then these notes. And what's amazing about this, particularly, is not everything is right on the rhythm. There's just that looseness and that flexibility that gives it some aeration and gives it a really, it makes it more exciting because it's almost like trying to catch up to itself. Gorgeous harmonies, right? Some trademark hallucinogen from the time. Other layer coming in. Clever use of the drums, and then sort of a bit of a lower range riff coming in. Then excitement. I mean, it's just like the air is just crackling and alive. And a beautiful pause. Storytelling, as I say every time. I mean, just listen to this beautiful narrative. It's just this complete gear change. Repeated note, and then some of those little voices going on. A wah-wah. pitch bending. Those voices. Gorgeous chord change. It totally fits harmonically. And now there's going to be a break where it all just breaks out. Just that atonal, out of nowhere kind of crazy melody while all the other stuff is going on. And we're back to the main riff. Love those drum rolls. And then there's a cool slide here. I mean, what was that? That is not a really long track. Let me just do a quick check over here. 6 minutes, 41 seconds. Holy, what a story, right? And there's that long introduction and quite a nice unwinding. But such storytelling, the beautiful organic intro, right? And just that drive that starts coming in. And this is one of those really, I haven't used the word celebratory in a little while, but right, this is like a celebration. It is ecstatic, it is uplifting, it is driven, it is really infectiously enthusiastic. And just the drive and the momentum. And as I was saying, right, where the rhythm is not, if that were produced now, everything would be a little too perfectly lined up. It needs to be done organically like this. So there's just that little bit like, it feels like one voice is trying to catch up with the other. And it just really gives it a sense of momentum. Plus, of course, I mean, all of the musical content in there is brilliant, right? So you've got that pitched stuff that's not melodic. Then you have the melodic stuff. Then you have the melodies being mirrored in different voices. Some fantastic harmonies, right? There's that perfect fifth, which happens a lot. There is the seventh as well. There's a minor second. There's all of this, moving around all of those different chords. And it's very singable. All of those intervals are really catchy, but it's so interesting how it's, broken up in the instrumentation and how it's delivered. Absolute masterpiece. So, this was one of the treasures, as I said, when I, left the UK with this fantastic set, and of course had it on DAT. And, this was the second track that I played out of my 4 tracks at that art gallery party. And it's also the track that I ended my first set in Tokyo in May '98. And I just, recently, last year, I played it in Goa, and it was the one I ended my set with. It is really an all-time classic track. So many elements that are just, again, really stand apart, even within our scene. this stands apart, that this is part of what I think makes the music in the scene stand apart. The instrumentation is so unique. The concept of blending this in with other tracks. I mean, it's like, every track has its own sound signature, right? In Goa sets. And so this is one of the delights, is that, everything feels so individual. And that's, again, when we look at things microcosmically and macrocosmically, each person on the dance floor being their own individual self and having commonalities with others, but also having their very different expressions of self, and having everything harmoniously fit together. That's one of the things that I really love about the old Goa sets. You're making this stuff that, in a sense, there's such difference. How do you get everything to fit together well? And then ideally, that's what the DJ is able to do. And that, I think, really is part of how it is that everybody on the dance floor gets along so brilliantly together. So there we go. An absolutely brilliant one-off masterpiece by Simon Posford and Youth, and, for the record, Gus Till. Truly unique production, which I will let you listen to without me blabbering over it. So I'm Mark, DJ Solitaire, leaving you now with the masterpiece by Mandala, Utopia.